Now we're going to take the nut and the bolt that hold the power steering pump support bracket on and put those in. Now we're going to put the pulley for the oil pump drive shaft back on. This cannot be installed backwards, it doesn't fit. There's a key here, a keyway in the shaft. Line them up, and again, it doesn't matter where this sits, it isn't timed to the other components. We're going to put our bolt in. Same as before, we'll use a screwdriver to hold it in place. We'll tighten it down to spec. Now we're going to thread the relay roller in. It goes into the cylinder head. Line it up, thread the bolt in, and then tighten it down to spec. Now we're going to put the tensioner in place. Tensioner goes here. Wiggle the relay out of the way, start both bolts, then once they're both started, we'll tighten them down to spec. The way the system works is the tensioner pushes up on this arm, moves this out on the eccentric, that's what tightens the belt. In order to give myself a little more room when I'm putting the tensioner and the belt together, I loosen this bolt right here enough so that the arm slides out so that I can move this pulley in a little bit and the tensioner is separate from it. That gives me enough space so that I don't have to push so hard while I'm putting the belt on. What I've ended up doing is taking the arm all the way off on this one. The belt's a little tight, so it's going to make it a lot easier to put on. I'm going to start by putting the belt at the top. I can see that my pulley up here is at top dead center. The marks are lined up. We'll put it around the tensioner. Hold the belt with this hand pulled down. And we want to have this part of the belt as tight as we can. Then we slide the belt over the oil pump pulley, which can be moved to make it easier. Right there. Now what we'll do is put this arm back on so there's a little tension on it. We'll spin it over a few times, double check all of our top dead centers, make sure we're good to go. I'm going to put the tensioner arm back on. To do that, I'm going to put an Allen wrench in the relay roller. We'll tighten that back up. That'll make it so we can spin the engine over. With the pin still in place on the tensioner, we're going to spin the engine over twice. There's enough tension on the belt so it's not going to skip. What we're going to look for is we're going to verify our top dead center comes back up correct here, and we're going to use our extension to verify the crankshaft is at top dead center also. You need to make 2 complete revolutions of the crankshaft to get 1 complete revolution of the timing belt. Okay, all the way up on top dead center with the piston. Our marks are lined up here on the camshaft. That means our camshaft is where it needs to be. Now we're going to pull the pin. That allows the tensioner to expand. That'll take up the slack in the belt. Before we put any covers back on, we're going to go through, check every bolt that we had off in here. The bolt for the oil pump, the bolts for the tensioner, the bolts that hold the relay roller on, the bolt that holds the arm on. Once we know they're all tight, we can start putting the covers back on. Okay, now we're going to put the lower timing cover on. When we put the lower timing cover on, two of the bolts are very important. They go through this front seal cover. If you don't put these two bolts in the lower timing cover, you're going to have a bad oil leak. So we'll line the timing cover up, put it on. It's this Allen bolt right here and the 10mm headed bolt that goes here are the two most important ones. Of course you need all of them, but if you forget these two, you're going to have a bad oil leak and have to take it all the way apart again. Again, with this nut that goes on the top one, sometimes it helps to put the socket on the nut first, then the extension in the socket. It's just a little off-centered. That gives you a little wiggle room to put it together. Okay, now we're going to move on to the upper timing cover. Okay, pins pulled. We've checked all of our bolts. Lower cover's on and tight. I'm going to put the upper cover on. They kind of slide together and join right here. This is the hardest part of getting this cover on, is making sure all of these pieces are lined up. Once you've got it set, you'll be able to clip it in. See, this is nice and tight. There's no gaps in it, so now we'll push it in on the top, put our little metal clips on. We can roll our hoses over and put them back into place. Now we're going to start putting the belts back on. And we're going to put the harmonic balancer back on. There are 5 holes in the balancer itself, 4 bolt holes, and this pin right here. So we line the 5th hole up with the pin, wiggle it, and it'll go together. You may have to wiggle it back and forth a little bit to get the bolts started. I've replaced the bolts that we had a hard time getting out with other bolts that were in better shape. Don't tighten any of them down until you get all 4 of them started. Even with all 4 of them in, there's some play in there. That's one of the reasons I don't trust that mark. Now you can go ahead and tighten all 4 of these down. Now we're going to put the serpentine belt tensioner on. What we'll do is start all 3 of these bolts before we tighten any down. Once they're all started, we just run them right in.